This video is going to be about the history of snowboarding, and I'm going to also put in different ideas in regards to how snowboarding got started, relating to how I started the sport Xtreme Ice Skating. And you'll see the sport snowboarding had a lot of problems and a lot of situations that are very similar to what we're facing now, what we faced in the past, and what Xtreme Ice Skating will face in the future. So, a brief history of snowboarding. I'm going to be reading from this book, and I'm going to be doing a commentary at the same time. Today, the sport of snowboarding is one of the most exciting and daring in the world. Athletes take their snowboards to the top of high mountains, to places accessible only by helicopter, and come flying down untried trails, jumping off ledges and rocks, traversing almost vertical drops, and even taking the time to do such tricks as 360 turns and a variety of flips. And you can see here that 360 turns, this is an outdated book. This was written in 2004. But even then, they shouldn't have been talking about 360s. They should have been talking about well past many spins than that. This, however, is not the only form of the sport. Some snowboarders do flying, twisting, acrobatic tricks in the half pipe, while others prefer to ride out-of-bounds obstacle courses, jumping, sliding off of fallen tree trunks and rocks. The sport has come a long way from the leisurely ride down the open slope, but plenty of people still do that as well. And it has all happened over the last few decades. It's actually happened since, you'll see later in this video, from the 1920s, which is to now, so that's about 90 years. With skiing being such an old and established sport of the world, especially in Europe and North America, you might think that snowboarding would have been invented a lot sooner. And I would agree with that fact. In point and fact, children living in New England in the early 1920s were building rudimentary boards from barrel staves and riding them sideways down snowy hills. Some point to that as the very crude beginning of the sport. I would argue that that's not even the beginning. That's just children having fun. That's probably something I would have done too, because it's crazy. But anyway, snowboarding surprisingly has been influenced by surfing and skateboarding, not skiing. And I could see that in a way. Surfing and skateboarding has been much of the influence in many sports, especially surfing. There was, of course, a process of evolution. Like all sports, is an evolution. In 1929, MJ Jack Burchet cut a plank of plywood and secured it to his feet with the length of a clothesline and some horse reins. And he used that arrangement to slide down a snowy hill, but his and others were isolated projects, backyard boards that never caught on with the general public or were mass marketed. So in other words, they were never really intended to be mass marketed. No business behind it. So much later in 1963, an 8th grade student named Tom Sims constructed what he called a ski board for a class project. But again, there was no effort to market the product. And that's the key word here, market. It was just a class project. It doesn't, just because you create a product or a project and make a snowboard back then, it doesn't mean it turns into a sport. But Sims later did create a company. And then in another 2 years along came the Snurfer. The Snurfer, and here's important, is usually considered the first major breakthrough because it was the first snowboard-like piece of equipment to become commercially available. So they're stating here in the book that it's important to note that it's the first breakthrough because it was a product that was meant to have fun, but the purpose was also because of business. It was meant to be sold. It was a commercially viable product, and that's part of what makes sport. They're entailing, or they're combining a product or an activity of having fun with business. They go hand in hand, and that's exactly what they just said here. It was created by Sherman Poppin, who devised the board as a toy for his children, and that's the sport aspect. He made the Snurfer by bolting 2 skis together and putting a rope on the nose, and that the rider could hold on to keep the board more stable. Poppin's wife came up with the name, and before long the boards were put on the market. They cost only $15, and more than 500,000 were sold in 1966. $15 today might not be a lot, but back then that was a lot of money, $15, and not to mention he sold 500,000. So imagine today, even if they only sold for 15, you sold 500,000, and your profit margin was, say, $1. If you sell 500,000, you're still gonna make $500,000 profit. Not bad. Jeff Grell is one of those members of the Snurfer who knew it well. Jeff Grell, G-R-E-L-L. Born in 1958, he has been part of the snowboarding movement from the beginning and is currently a snowboard World Cup technical delegate. That's a mouthful. All due respect to the man. I don't know why they said it like that. Let's just say he was the chief official at certain events. He has helped draw up guidelines for both ski and snowboard instructors and has produced more than 300 events. So they're saying here he has helped draw up the guidelines. Every sport needs guidelines. Every sport has to follow a progression pattern, and you know, there was events here. So every sport also needs events. All these keyword things, how business, sport, guidelines, events, they're drawing the picture, but not per se in this book. They're not really doing it outrightly, but they are hinting at it. Not surprisingly, he and his wife, so Jeff Grell and his wife, played a significant role in snowboarding's history and still climbs on his board whenever he can. Like other early riders, it all started for him with the Snurfer. When the Snurfer came on the market, Grell recalls, my older brother picked one up. We used to use it on the local hills around Bridgeport, Connecticut, and we got pretty good at it. I'd have to say that back then the Snurfer was considered state-of-the-art. We fell a lot, but in the fresh snow, we can make them turn pretty well. We developed some basic skills, but the Snurfer had no bindings. The rider had to hold on to a rope tether, and freedom of movement was hindered by that. Still, it was fun, and the Snurfer, I had used the Snurfer for a number of years. Soon, though, other people had begun developing boards. In the early 1970s, East Coast surfer Dmitry Milovich, I'm sorry, dude, I can't pronounce your name, had an idea while sliding on cafeteria trays in the snow of upstate New York. He began to develop snowboards based on short surfboards and skis. And he tried rudimentally steel edges, and obviously the steel edges you could see came from the idea of a food tray because of the lip on the food tray, which makes perfect sense. But this man Dmitry, he gave up on this idea because he only rode in deep powder. He didn't ride on packed snow. So in 1975, the design for his board, called Winter Stick, was written up in Newsweek. And Winter Stick is now considered the first snowboard company. So Winter Stick was ahead of its time, Jeff Grell said. You could do things on powdered snow with it that were pretty fantastic for that time. The technique of the board was much better than earlier boards, but it still wasn't good on hard snow. The problem would soon disappear as snowboard technology began to improve rapidly, and Jake Burton Carpenter in Vermont, began making boards, one model made from steam-bent wood and another made of fiberglass. So Tom Sims, and here's like a critical point here, Tom Sims at Flight Snowboards also developed boards for harder snow, allowing riders to traverse even difficult terrain. So you got soft snow and hard snow, and it's sort of like you got one world but without the other. You need a product that can satisfy all conditions, no matter where you go out and how much it snowed, or whether it snowed a while ago or it just snowed at all. And this is accessibility. Then in 1980, Carpenter and the Winter Stick merged to make the new P-Tex board based on ski technology. Now riders had more versatility and the opportunity to develop with their skills. The question suddenly became not what can we use to snowboard, but where can we snowboard? And you'll see this same exact problem that we have in our sport now with extreme ice skating. It's not what can we use to extreme ice skate, because we do use our hockey skates, and we have a product, an extreme ice skate, that's meant for the sport, coming out this summer, or expected to come out this summer in 2012. But that's not the problem. But it's where can we skate? Rink management are kicking us out of the rinks in many parts of the world, and many rinks, just in my country alone, the United States. And I know it's a huge problem in a lot of other countries, especially England. And the countries that seem to be doing better is Germany and Belgium and France. I don't know why this is, but the point is that where there's places to practice, just as snowboarding, they have a product, a board to practice with, just as the snowboarders did, but they had nowhere to go. And we have nowhere to go. Extreme ice skaters have nowhere to go. So, and then you can also probably make that reference to freestyle ice skating as well, but I don't think they would have as many problems as we do, because freestyle ice skaters, they tend to stick to small circles. They don't jump. So, but it all ties in, because I'm going to go on here and I'm going to explain how this ties in. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, as more people began riding boards, the ski resorts were still not letting boarders on the same slope as the skiers. See, here we go again. You could make the argument that the extreme ice skaters and freestyle ice skaters are still not being allowed on public sessions to skate freely as they do, as figure skaters do. And it's not fair, but we're gonna have to circumvent that problem. And let's see how they did it. The ski industry just didn't know what to make of this new sport. And of course we're referring to snowboarding. The biggest roadblock then was insurance. Snowboards were classified as snowplay, like a toboggan or a dish. In other words, the insurance industry didn't acknowledge that the rider had control. That meant in effect that snowboarding wasn't yet considered a real sport. So they're saying here that because the insurance did not back snowboarding as a sport or even as an activity, it therefore wasn't a sport. So let me re-say that. Because snowboarding because insurance did not cover snowboarding, snowboarding wasn't considered a sport. And therefore, because it wasn't considered a sport and there was no protection for liability, getting sued, ski resorts refused to let them on the slopes. And it was also because at the time, a lot of the snowboarders were very much like skateboarders, and you could argue that they didn't have respect for other people around them because they weren't used to skating on slopes. They were used to skateboarding, skating by themselves, doing what the heck they want to do. So that meant, snowboarding wasn't yet considered a real sport, and snowboarding wouldn't go away, and eventually there were concessions in progress. Just as we've had concessions and a lot of progress, not many concessions, but we're getting there. The first international snowboard race was held on a mountain called Suicide 6, just outside Woodstock, Vermont, in 1982. So this is the concession they're referring to. And in our own sport, extreme ice skating, the concessions we're referring to are the rinks that actually do let us skate the way we want to. And this, I would argue, is kind of just luck at the moment. But hey, I'll take what we can get, right? It was said that the real object of the race seemed to be survival, because the run would seem so dangerous. Yet the sport was growing and began to attract more participants. By the early 1980s, however, the situation on the slopes at the ski resorts hadn't changed for boarders. So, snowboarders still had to find their own places to ride, just as we have to find our own places to skate. And Jeff Grell remembers doing a great deal of hiking in those days, as did other pioneers of the sport. Snowboarders did their riding out of bounds before they could go on the conventional slopes, Grell explained. Because we had to go there to simply ride our boards, right away we were in a more risk-inherent locations.